The first thing my brother saw that morning was the federal marshal taping a seizure notice across the glass doors of his investment firm while rain hammered the sidewalks of downtown Chicago like nails being dumped from the sky. His Porsche sat crooked at the curb, with a yellow tow sticker slapped against the windshield. Reporters were already gathering behind the barricades. Phones were out, cameras flashing. Everyone wanted footage of the great Marcus Bennett collapsing in real time. And then he saw me. I was standing under the black awning across the street in the same charcoal gray canvas jacket I'd worn for nearly 6 years, same faded jeans, same old silver Toyota parked beside the hydrant like I'd just come from a hardware store. Nobody looking at me would have guessed I controlled enough liquid cash to buy the entire building Marcus was losing. His face turned white. Not pale, white, like all the blood in his body had suddenly remembered every terrible thing he'd ever done. "John," he whispered. The marshal stepped aside as Marcus stumbled toward me through the rain. His expensive loafers splashed through dirty gutter water. 2 months earlier, he'd mocked those same shoes for not being Italian leather. Now he looked like a man drowning in public. "You did this," his voice cracked. "Please tell me this isn't you." I looked past him toward the building, 43 floors of glass and steel, his pride, his empire, or at least the illusion of one. The banks had already frozen his corporate shareholder equity accounts before sunrise. The foreclosure on collateral notices had started hitting his investors less than an hour ago. By noon, every fake shell company he'd hidden behind would collapse into bankruptcy court. Marcus stared at me like he was finally seeing a ghost that had been standing beside him the entire time. "You hid this from us?" he said. "All these years?" Behind him, another tow truck hooked onto his Porsche. I remember the exact smell in the air at that moment. Rainwater, diesel smoke, wet concrete, and fear. Pure fear. "I begged you not to touch Mom's house," I said quietly. Marcus swallowed hard. "John, listen to me." "I didn't know." "No," I interrupted. "You just didn't care." His knees nearly buckled. The reporter started shouting questions. Someone yelled my name. He turned toward them in panic, then back to me like I was the last lifeboat left on Earth. "Please," he whispered. "You can stop this." I stared at him for a long moment while water dripped from the edge of my hood. Then I leaned closer. "You mistook silence for weakness," I said. "That was the most expensive mistake of your life." But to understand how I, John Bennett, ended up standing over my brother's financial funeral while federal attorneys emptied his empire floor by floor, you have to go back 11 months. Back before the jackpot, before the lawyers, before my family learned what greed really costs. Back when everyone still thought I was the failure of the family. At the time, I was living in a tiny rented duplex on the south side, with cracked kitchen tiles and a leaking radiator that screamed like a dying animal every winter morning. I worked remote compliance analysis for a logistics company that treated employees like replaceable printer paper. My boss, Richard Halpern, loved reminding me that I was lucky to have the position at all. "Some people are built for leadership," he told me one afternoon during a video call. "Others are built for stability. You should appreciate stability, John." What he really meant was people like Marcus deserved penthouses, while people like me deserved spreadsheets. I just nodded. That's what I always did. People mistake quiet men for powerless men, Marcus especially. My brother lived in a world of polished marble floors, imported whiskey, and conversations stuffed with phrases he barely understood. He loved throwing around terms like high-yield venture capital trust and private wealth management strategies in front of relatives during family dinners because it made him sound important. Mom used to smile politely while he talked, even though half the time she looked completely lost. I knew Marcus was drowning in debt long before anyone else did. That's the funny thing about people obsessed with looking rich. They leave fingerprints everywhere. The leased cars, the over-leveraged commercial loans, the frantic refinancing, the hidden capital gains liabilities buried under fake confidence and expensive watches. But nobody listened to me because I drove a 12-year-old Toyota and wore jackets from outlet stores, including my sister-in-law, Vanessa. Vanessa didn't just dislike me. She studied me with the kind of disgust people reserve for stains they can't scrub out of furniture. At Mom's birthday dinner, she watched me pull into Marcus's gated driveway and laughed softly enough for only Marcus to hear. "He still drives that thing," she whispered. Marcus smirked. "Some people get comfortable being mediocre." I heard every word. I just kept walking. Mom hugged me tightly the second I entered the kitchen. She always smelled faintly like cinnamon and coffee grounds. "You're too skinny," she said immediately. "You say that every week." "Because every week it's true." Marcus came downstairs adjusting the cuffs on his tailored navy suit. Gold watch gleaming, smile rehearsed. "There he is," he announced loudly. "The mysterious accountant." "Compliance analyst," I corrected. "Same thing." Vanessa slid wine glasses onto the island counter. "Marcus was just explaining estate executor clauses to us," she said. "Apparently, wealthy families need very sophisticated planning." Marcus grinned. I almost laughed, because 2 weeks earlier I'd quietly reviewed a public filing connected to one of Marcus's commercial properties and discovered he'd nearly defaulted on a $7 million bridge loan. But arrogance is loudest right before collapse. Dinner carried on under the warm kitchen lights, while rain rolled against the windows. Marcus dominated every conversation. Stocks, venture acquisitions, corporate partnerships. He loved hearing himself speak. Meanwhile, I sat beside Mom, helping refill her tea. At one point, Marcus leaned back and said, "You know what separates successful people from average people?" Vanessa smiled before he even answered. "Risk tolerance." I took another bite silently. Marcus pointed his fork toward me. "That's why John stays exactly where he is. No ambition." Mom frowned slightly. "Marcus." "No, it's true," he continued. "He's smart. But smart people can still think too small." I looked at him calmly, and reckless people can think they're invincible. The table went quiet. Vanessa gave me a sharp look. Marcus laughed like he wasn't bothered. But I saw it, that tiny flicker in his eyes. Fear. 3 days later, my life changed forever in the most ordinary place imaginable. A gas station. I'd stopped after work to buy black coffee and windshield wiper fluid because one of the blades on my Toyota had started smearing rainwater across the glass instead of clearing it. The cashier looked exhausted. Neon lights buzzed overhead. Country music played faintly from an old radio near the cigarettes. And sitting beside the register was a lottery display. $45 million. Normally, I ignored those things completely. But for some reason that night, standing there soaked from rain with exactly $40 left until payday, I bought one ticket. One. That was it. I didn't even check it until the following evening. At first, I thought I was reading the numbers wrong. Then I checked again. Then again. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear blood inside my ears. I sat motionless on the edge of my couch, staring at the screen while the radiator hissed behind me. $45 million. I remember laughing once. Not because it was funny, because my brain literally couldn't process the scale of it. Then came the terror, real terror, because sudden money doesn't just change your life. It exposes everyone around you. The next 48 hours became a blur of NDAs, attorneys, tax strategists, and private meetings in cold corporate offices 30 floors above the city. The legal team assigned to me spoke in calm, measured tones while explaining trust structures, capital gains liabilities, multi-million-dollar asset portfolio protection, and private wealth management protocols designed for lottery winners who didn't want their lives destroyed overnight. One attorney named Claire slid a folder toward me. "You need to disappear financially before people know," she said. "I already am financially invisible." She looked up from her glasses. "Good. Stay that way." So I did. I created holding companies, silent trusts, layered banking protections. I studied everything, every asset, every loophole, every risk, and the entire time I told nobody, especially my family. Then came the night Marcus crossed a line he could never uncross. Mom called me around midnight, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Marcus says the house has to be refinanced," she whispered. "He says if I don't sign papers, the bank could come after all of us." I sat upright instantly. "What papers?" He said it's temporary. Coldness spread through my chest. I drove to Marcus's house immediately, Rain hammered the windshield the entire drive. When I arrived, Vanessa opened the door wearing silk pajamas and irritation. "He's busy." "I don't care." Marcus was already waiting in his office upstairs, whiskey glass in hand. "You scared Mom," I said. "She's emotional. You're using her house as collateral." He leaned back slowly. "Temporary collateral." "For what?" He smiled thinly. "You wouldn't understand leveraged expansion." I stared at the paperwork on his desk. Then I saw it. An estate executor clause transferring partial control rights if default conditions activated. My stomach tightened. "You're gambling with her house." Marcus's expression hardened instantly. "Careful." "No," I said quietly. "You be careful." For the first time in years, the mask slipped completely off his face. "You know what your problem is, John," he snapped. "You've always been jealous." I almost laughed at that. Jealous. Of a man secretly collapsing under debt while pretending to be royalty. "You think because Mom pities you, you get a vote," he continued. "You contribute nothing." Vanessa appeared behind him, folding her arms. "Marcus is trying to build generational wealth while you're still fixing your own windshield wipers." There it was. The contempt. Pure and honest. I looked at both of them for a long moment. Then Marcus slid another document across the desk. "At least do one useful thing," he said. "Convince Mom to sign." Instead, I picked up the papers, folded them carefully, and dropped them directly into his fireplace. Vanessa gasped. Marcus exploded out of his chair. "What the hell is wrong with you?" The flames swallowed the contracts instantly. I turned calmly toward the door. "You just made a very expensive enemy," Marcus said behind me. I paused without looking back. "No," I replied softly. "You did." The next morning, I woke up to an official eviction notice taped to my duplex door. Marcus had connections with the property owner through one of his development companies. 30 days. Legal and airtight. He thought he'd cornered me financially. Thought he'd broken me. I stood there reading the notice while cold wind moved through the parking lot. Then I smiled. For the first time since winning the jackpot. I finally understood exactly how I was going to destroy him. I pulled out my phone and dialed the private banking number Claire had given me weeks earlier. The line connected immediately. "Mr. Bennett," the woman answered professionally. "How would you like to proceed with the acquisition strategy?" I looked at the eviction notice one last time. Then I said 4 words that changed everything. "Buy every debt he owes."